Welcome, everybody. My name is Ashley, and I'm a Senior Intelligence Analyst here with Intel 471. I'm here today to walk you through the basics of malware and what it can teach you about an incident or a threat actor. Malware can be an overwhelming topic to approach, especially for those who may have an intelligence background, but not necessarily a technical one. There are so many resources out there that it can be tough to know where to start. But on the plus side, there are so many resources out there that once you start, there are a lot of different places you can go to continue learning. I'm still learning myself and always will be, and that's okay, and you can do that too. Today's aim is to help you start, to teach you what's even out there. We'll start at the beginning, as you'll see on the next slide, and then we'll dive into a couple of different types of malware, explain how they work and how threat actors deliver them, and give you a bird's eye view of the type of information that can be extracted from malware samples, which can aid in investigation or assist in an incident response or just further your own understanding. My aim here today is to give you a solid basic foundation on top of which you can keep building your expertise. While I present this webinar, there's a chat box on your screen where you can submit questions, so please do so, and I'll take some time at the end to answer as many as I can and as many as I have time for. So, the title of this presentation is Malware Analysis 101, so I would be remiss if I didn't start from the very beginning. So what is malware? At its most literal, the word malware is a portmanteau of two words, malicious and software. So malware is malicious software. But in a more broad sense, malware is an umbrella term used to describe a variety of programs or codes created to harm a computer, a network, or a server. Cybercriminals develop malware to infiltrate a computer system and leak or destroy sensitive data in computer systems. When conducting a malware attack on a system or an organization, hackers have different goals, which might impact what malware they decide to use. Maybe they're ideologically driven and they want to spy on the user, or maybe they simply want to be paid a ransom. On the screen here, you'll see some common categories of malware, and later in the presentation, we'll get more specific about some popular types of malware, all of which pretty much fall under the broad category of Trojans. But as you can see, malware can work in a variety of different ways, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. In addition to having in addition to being designed to have different effects on a victim's system, there's also a couple different ways malware is sold or offered on the cybercriminal underground. First, you have custom malware, which is designed for a specific vulnerability, system, or application. Custom malware can be developed by the threat actor themselves or bought on the cyber underground, but since there are fewer operators, it can sometimes be used to help identify the threat actor or group a little bit easier. However, since custom malware is often novel, they can be more easily modified to evade detection, making it harder for antivirus systems to detect it. Then you have malware as a service. Like many other as-a-service models that we see on the cybercriminal underground, malware as a service, or MAS, is a bundle of software and applications that are leased out to threat actors. Basically, it's ready-to-use malware immediately upon purchase. With MAS, malware creators develop and maintain the software and lease access to the malware so that other threat actors could use it for a particular time frame or a number of uses. The developer or operator configures and maintains the C2 servers, which I'll define what those is in a little bit. So the clients don't need to worry about that or even have very much technical expertise. This is attractive to underground actors. It lowers the barrier to entry, and often there are many users and clients of MAS, which makes it difficult for attribution, but easier for antivirus to detect it. So how do victims encounter malware in the first place? Malware is usually distributed through malicious websites, emails, and software, and malware can also be hidden within files such as images, document files, or executables, but there are a few very common ways. First, we've got the tried and true method of a malicious email. Malicious emails are typically phishing emails that can contain malicious links or attachments. Typically, the email tries to trick individuals into opening a zip file, Microsoft Office, PDF attachment, you name it, which then deploys the malware. In the case of malicious links, the URL redirects the user to a malicious site that then triggers the malware download. You've also got pay per install. Here, threat actors pay another threat actor to install malware on the target system. You've got malvertising. These are malicious advertisements that target security vulnerabilities in older browsers to install malware. And this can also be partnered with SEO poisoning, which we will also touch on in just a second. You've also got drive-by downloads. Here, threat actors exploit weaknesses in the back end of a legitimate website. Malware is hidden inside, or site visitors are redirected to pages controlled by the threat actor, sometimes via advertisements on the page itself. And lastly, a very common method is pirated software. Some cracked or pirated software comes bundled with malware. Also, websites that host pirated software can be more vulnerable to drive-by downloads and malvertising. Also, Pirated software doesn't receive official developer updates to patch vulnerabilities, leaving security weaknesses open and vulnerable to attack. Now, on the screen here, you'll see an example of a malicious email. It's nothing fancy to look at, but this is a real snippet of code from an Emotet send spam event. For those of you newer to cyber, the Emotet banking Trojan was first identified by security researchers back in 2014. It was originally designed as a banking malware that attempted to sneak onto your computer and steal sensitive and private information. The primary purpose of Emotet, though, changed around 2017 when the bot started to be deployed without the banking module. Emotet then had a new purpose, which was mass infection. The bot's now known primarily as a loader of other malware, typically other banking Trojans, and also supports a spam module used for spreading itself with worm-like capabilities. And a couple years ago, back in 2020, CISA stated that Emotet is one of the most costly and destructive malwares affecting both the government and private sectors. In fact, this particular send spam event spoofed a couple FBI email addresses in order to target FBI employees. So Emotet actually went after some pretty high-profile targets. So more and more often, we're observing a new trend in spam delivery, which is reply chain spam. This is similar to a thread hijacking scam, if you've ever heard of that, but done at scale. In a reply chain attack, malicious agents typically have deployed malware that will exfiltrate the entire contents of the victim's email inbox. The email data of thousands of victims are inserted into a large database, which will serve as the base of new spam infection campaigns. These campaigns can efficiently and effectively hijack ongoing conversation threads, insert malware, typically as an attachment, and send it to participants of the email thread. The key thing to remember is that these operations are fully automated and occur at scale, meaning tens of thousands of unique emails are sent per campaign. A major reason to worry about these types of attacks is their effectiveness in bypassing email protection products and in convincing victims to buy the lure, i.e., click on that malicious attachment or link. The usual warning flags that help you identify a phishing attack are usually absent in reply chain attacks. The fact that the reply is from a legitimate sender and part of an existing conversation lends credibility to the message. We've seen high-profile threat actor groups, such as the people behind Qbot and Emotet, using reply chain email campaigns, and we expect the use of reply chain email campaign tactics to continue to increase with time. Now, search engine optimization, or SEO poisoning, is also becoming an increasing threat to individuals and organizations, but it's not a new attack technique. The impact of SEO poisoning can be significant, so it is one worth highlighting here. The core idea of SEO poisoning is to manipulate search engine results, redirecting users looking for popular websites to fraudulent ones infected with malicious links. These fraudulent websites are designed to look as identical as possible to the legitimate sites, and certain keywords are used to make them appear higher in the search results, thereby increasing the likelihood that users will click. Adversaries can obtain higher search result rankings by using black hat SEO techniques such as keyword stuffing, cloaking, and link schemes. Once a user clicks on the link to a fraudulent site, they might be redirected to a page that's designed to steal their personally identifiable information, or PII, install malware on their device, or perform other nefarious activities. However, some groups are jumping to the top of results by paying for advertisements on search engines. One example of a group using such techniques is BokBot. BokBot's recent campaigns leveraged Google's pay-per-click, or PPC, search ads platform, which allowed actors to place their advertisements at the top of the search results, tricking users into going to a malicious website and opening and extracting their malicious compressed or zip archives. Some campaigns from BokBot so far this year include masquerading as W-9 form download links, a tax form for independent contractors in the United States. Here you can see the fake BokBot IRS advertisement appeared above the legitimate irs.gov website. It's also masqueraded as offers for the LibreOffice Business Productivity Suite. BokBot's advertisements use typo squatting domains, i.e., URLs are only a couple letters off from the real thing. Once a victim clicks the false link, they're redirected to a fake web page containing the malicious download link, which looks like this. Detecting malicious domains hosting malware opens up a whole host of potential investigative avenues, whether that's pivoting off of WHOIS information. You can get the registrant, the IP the domain resolves to, the hosting provider. All of these allow you to discover more domains, ID avenues for legal process, and track malware campaigns on a large scale. Another item to consider with malicious advertisements is sending legal process to Google to determine who paid for that advertisement. And of course, analyzing the sample itself for tracking campaigns on a large scale. So, with all of that covered, and what malware is and how it can get on your system, with some items that can help your analysis, tracking, or investigation, let's dive into some specific malware types. Remote access Trojans, or RATs, are programs that can provide the capability to allow covert surveillance or gain unauthorized access to a victim machine. RATs often mimic similar behaviors to keylogger applications by allowing the automated collection of keystrokes, usernames, passwords, screenshots, browser history, emails, and chat logs. However, RATs differ from keyloggers in that they provide the capability for an attacker to gain unauthorized remote access to the victim machine via specifically configured communication protocols, which are set up upon the initial infection of a victim computer. This backdoor into the victim machine can allow an attacker unfettered access, plus the ability to monitor user behavior, change computer settings, browse and copy files, and utilize the bandwidth of the internet connection for possible criminal activity, access connected systems, and more. With their ability to provide unauthorized remote control of a compromised system, RATs pose a significant threat to individuals, businesses, and even governments. With their access to sensitive information, their monitoring abilities, and their ability to deploy additional malware that can cause irreparable damage to systems. Amongst cybercriminals, RATs are commonly used for a few purposes. Number one, they can facilitate account takeover, or ATO. Threat actors will passively monitor the behavior of the victim to identify financial software and user accounts and see how those accounts are protected, such as with two-factor authentication, in order to eventually take over those accounts to make transfers. They are also used to record or steal sexually explicit material from their victim for later extortion or to sell said material. Or number three, they're used to gain access to systems that are otherwise inaccessible, such as SCADA or industrial control systems, through control software that's installed on the victim machine. Now, I do want to take a minute to talk about command and control servers here. So a command and control server, or C2, receives messages from infected machines and sends commands from the threat actor to their malware to distribute malicious programs, malicious scripts, and more. They are the brains of the malware operation, the remote control, a central point where the bad guys, quote unquote, come in. They enable communication between the threat actor and the target. Because of this, establishing and maintaining a C2 connection is an essential step for threat actors. And conversely, it's a key item that investigators can locate, identify, and monitor. Being able to detect C2 servers is one of the best ways of identifying malware activity, keeping up with the current activity, and tracking malware campaigns. So, how do they work? As the name implies, command and control servers issue commands and controls to compromised systems. More often than not, these systems are internet-connected computers of home users that then form botnets. A botnet is a network of computers or bots that have been infected with malware that allows them to be controlled remotely. This malware can be used for various purposes, including sending bulk spam emails, stealing personal information, and launching distributed denial of service attacks. They can also be used to control devices like webcams, routers, and security cameras. The term bot refers to the fact that these programs run autonomously without any human interaction. They don't require any user input other than when initializing themselves. This graphic shows a botnet on the left. These are all infected machines running some piece of malware, and that malware then connects to one or more control servers, which is in the middle. They do a sort of check-in that says, hey, I'm a new bot, I'm alive, I'm here to take orders. Then you have the bot master on the far right who administers the entire botnet through this control server. So this is a centralized point where the bot master issues commands to the different bots. These communications and these commands and controls can be as simple as maintaining a timed beacon or heartbeat so the operators running the attack can keep an inventory of the systems that they have compromised so far within the target network. But these communications can also be used for more malicious actions, as I said earlier, such as data exfiltration. While the command and control server is used to control the system on the inside of a target organization, it's usually the compromised host that initiates the communication from inside the network back outside to a command and control server on the public internet. So, a rat will set up a command and control, or C2 channel, with the attacker's server, over which commands can be sent to the rat and data can be sent back. Rats commonly have a set of built-in commands and can have methods for hiding their C2 traffic from detection. AsyncRat is an open-source rat first released in 2019. The malware comes with base plugins that expand its functionality, and some of the wide range available for AsyncRat provide screen sharing, file and password theft, and keylogger functionality. Malware users only need to run a Windows executable to start the C2 server and sample builder that can create an AsyncRat binary with a designed configuration. Once AsyncRat runs a series of checks and collects all desired information, it sends the data to its C2 server. Here on the left, I've listed a few AsyncRat C2 server URLs identified through sample analysis, just showing how identifying C2 servers can provide an opportunity for investigative pivoting and analysis when tracking rats. But I also want to clarify here that C2s are used by more malware types than just rats. Examining an Emotet sample, a newer one than the one contained within that spam email I showed you earlier, we found an IP address for a C2. Now, to keep this presentation TLP clear, I've placed the general IP block up on the screen, but we also identified that it's potentially hosted on a compromised DigitalOcean server, providing an opportunity for investigators to monitor the infrastructure, for legal process to be served, or to disrupt the operation with a takedown. There are two important things to consider when identifying infrastructure like this, and these are key. Number one, malware operators like to use proxies to hide their true infrastructure. And number two, internet service providers and hosting providers should be instructed to capture and preserve evidence and not just suspend or terminate the account. Nevertheless, identifying C2 URLs provides investigators a key point to pivot off in their cases. Often, low-tier infrastructure like C2 addresses within malware samples point to upper-tier pivot points, sometimes pointing investigators to the location hosting the real panel, providing invaluable evidence to a case. So next up are banking Trojans, which are on the decline. The golden years for financially motivated actors operating banking Trojans was between 2006 and 2017. Since then, ransomware operations have become much more appealing to cybercriminal actors, but these aren't completely extinct, and some of their key artifacts can lead you to the human side of malware, the money mules. Banking Trojans, like other Trojans, gain access to a computer by pretending to be legitimate software. Once installed on an infected machine, banking Trojans collect online banking login credentials and other sensitive information in various ways. Some methods include dumping cached credentials from the system in web browsers, monitoring the system keyboard, searching the file system for stored passwords, and using a keylogger to collect login details when a user browses target websites. One of the key components of a banking Trojan are web injects. In most banking Trojan families, there is at least one web injects module. The web injects module hooks the API calls responsible for sending, receiving, or encrypting data sent to a web server. By intercepting the data before it's encrypted, the malware can read the HTTP post headers and manipulate them on the fly. In simple terms, web injects inject malicious HTML or JavaScript code into a web page before it's redirected to a legitimate bank website. Typically, a web inject acts as an overlay, resembling a legitimate bank login web page. The overlay requests a user to input data like payment card data, social security numbers, PINs, CVV codes, and any number of additional PII not actually requested by the bank. By fully controlling the HTTP headers just before the web page is rendered, the malware can completely modify the forms and fool the user. The malware can then extract this information and send it to its C2 server without actually sending the forged headers to the targeted web page. Often, web injects are customized to target a particular organization or website. So this list is a partial list of targeted sites observed within a web inject event from GOSI ISFB, a banking Trojan that's been around since at least 2007 and has evolved numerous times over the years. The web inject event lists URLs that trigger fraudulent activity the banking Trojan performed. Some advanced web injects can initiate wire money transfers from the compromised victim machine without needing to log into the victim's account and bypass two-factor authentication. Automatic Transfer System, or ATS, injects scripts linked to the C2 server with banking information, such as bank accounts, account balances, and other personal information. ATS alters on-the-fly legitimate banking transfers performed by the user, changing the beneficiary and transferring money to an illegitimate bank account controlled by the threat actor or affiliates, which are then responsible for handling and laundering the stolen money. A closer inspection of the web inject payload can provide insight into the ATO operation and retrieve the mule accounts destined to receive the fraudulent transactions, providing potential subjects to interview as well as financial trails for the operation. In past investigations, Intel 471 has found the following types of information from these injects to include the mule's name, their bank account numbers, bank identifier codes, and even their location. So moving on from banking Trojans, we'll now cover information stealing malware. Infostealers are a form of malware whose primary capability is to retrieve data from infected systems and exfiltrate it to a remote system. Data typically captured includes stored browser credentials, stored form entries, cookies, and details of the operating system, device, and user. Once the machine is infected, the victim information is exfiltrated. Interestingly, while some stealers do have C2 servers, not all of them do. Occasionally, these programs exfiltrate victim information to a different location, whether that's to Discord, Telegram, or even an email address. Analyzing samples and determining where victim data is being sent can provide some interesting pivot points in your investigation. You just follow the trail of exfiltration. For example, with an email address, pivot points include which IPs access the inbox, when, and what ISPs they correlate to. Telegram channels, Discord channels allow for OSINT monitoring, pivoting off of those handles, etc. Within the underground marketplace, Infostealer logs are commonly sold across the underground. Here's an example of a redacted offering for Redline Infostealer logs within a Telegram channel. These logs are commonly bought by access vendors who sort through the compromised credentials to identify corporate accesses, especially to a VPN or RDP service, and then sell those accesses to ransomware operators who then try to impact that organization. So, what are in these archives that are sold across the underground? Most commonly, you'll see text files, lots and lots and lots of text files. This is typically done due to the small data size, making the exfiltration efficient and increasing success rates. Normally, we see only text files in a screenshot, but sometimes they might choose to exfiltrate documents, spreadsheets, Word documents, PDFs, etc. It's fairly uncommon and typically covers the documents that are on the desktop. Now, there are a few things that can be done just by looking at the file listing with no clicking involved. The format and naming conventions, for one thing, can tell you a lot about what Infostealer might be involved. In the case of Redline, the file names highlighted in the red boxes to the right are typically indicative of this particular malware family. So without any technical expertise or clicking involved, we can tell what malware was likely used here. Some quick context for those of you that might be unfamiliar, but Redline Stealer is a credential stealer malware that appeared in February of 2020. This stealer was advertised on Russian underground forums with several different pricing options, and logs from this stealer are sold on several underground marketplaces alongside custom tools to extract and parse the information from these stolen data bundles. It's one of the most, if not the most, prominent information stealer currently active in the underground. So there's helpful information within the text files themselves as well, as long as they're viewed with caution. Sandboxes can be helpful for this, which I will discuss shortly, as are techniques such as viewing text files within the proper applications. For example, this panel on the left is showing us what was contained within the user information file, and it contains information like the operating system of the infected device, location, username, etc. The date and time here is the date and time of when the infection occurred. These folders also contain things like cookies, usernames, passwords, IP addresses, etc. A helpful artifact within these files is also the screenshot. This is a screen capture of the desktop at the moment the infection occurred. Now, this is an example of what it can look like, and I do apologize for it being a little bit fuzzy. I will use some very fancy zooming and enhancing here to kind of zoom in a little bit for you. But I hope you can see that they were installing KMS Pico, which is a common software used to try and bypass Windows licensing. It's a very common tool that Infostealer operators backdoor as well. At the top of the screenshot, you can also see that the user had some tabs open, as well as the website on which the user downloaded this software, providing another pivot point for analysis. In this case, the user was on a website called mega.nz, which is a cloud storage and file hosting service, which law enforcement is very familiar with, and has even tied to ransomware groups like Conti in the past. Now, on the one hand, I want to provide a word of caution to people analyzing Infostealer credential data, because the people who operate Infostealers make their money off of infecting devices. So often people who operate Infostealers include a copy of the malware somewhere within the archives as well. And sometimes, for example, when looking at a file listing of data, you might see what looks to be a screenshot, but is in fact an executable. So please be careful. But on the other hand, it's worth noting that this does sometimes provide an opportunity. Sometimes the operators accidentally infect themselves, and the archives from that self-infection can provide a lot of valuable information to further your investigation, just like we can see with the information here. Here, I've redacted information identifying the username and the password, but this is a login for Exploit, which is a Russian language cybercriminal forum, which implies that this forum user was likely the one that was operating the malware. Of course, if you're interested in tracking malware, intelligence vendors can help with that. So quick shout out to ourselves here, but at the core of our malware intelligence is our unique and patented malware emulation and tracking system, or METS, that provides ongoing surveillance of malware activity at the command and control level, thus delivering near real-time insights and deep context. Whether you need high fidelity indicators of compromise to track individual spam campaigns as they're executed, or to hunt for the precursors of a ransomware scenario, our malware intelligence can help you start the shift towards a proactive and intelligence-led cybersecurity posture. But I did also want to provide you with some open source tools that might be of use as you start your journey into malware. So, number one are sandboxes. Sandboxes are a safe place to execute files and observe their behavior. Some even might try to classify the threat or malware family for you. There are several free online sandboxes, such as Joe's Sandbox, AnyRun, or Hybrid Analysis. Number two is CyberChef. This is basically a Swiss Army knife of a data manipulation tool. It lets you do things like decode a base 64 encoded string, convert data from a hex dump and then decompress it, or decrypt and disassemble shellcode. Third, you've got some command line tools such as Dig and Whois. These help investigators identify who's responsible for a domain or IP address. Dig resolves domain names to IP addresses, and Whois returns information about the registrant or registrar of a domain name or the responsible party for an IP address. I also want to mention VirusTotal. This is a service that analyzes suspicious files and URLs to detect types of malware and malicious content using antivirus engines and website scanners, but be aware on this one. When you submit a file or URL, basic results are shared with the submitter and also between the examining partners who use the results to improve their own system. So if it's something sensitive, just keep that in mind. And lastly, I just want to mention AbuseCH. This is an online service that identifies and tracks cyber threats with a strong focus on malware and botnets. So just some tools to place in your tool chest as you expand your malware knowledge. And that is my kind of quick 101 to malware for you. It was hopefully educational, accessible, and thorough enough for you, but I will open up the floor for questions. And if nobody has any and you want to peace out now, I do just want to thank you for your time and for attending today. And with that, I will open up the floor.